Act 1. The Ghost Ship. The ocean has always been a place of profound mystery. Its vast, deep, and often violent nature has inspired stories of strange creatures, lost worlds, and phantom vessels for as long as humans have dared to sail upon it. Of all the tales of the sea, none is more famous, more baffling, or more enduring than the story of the Mary Celeste. It is the quintessential ghost ship, a real-life maritime enigma that has captivated the public imagination for over 150 years. It is the story of a perfectly good ship found sailing on its own in the middle of the Atlantic. Its cargo intact, its sails set, but with its entire crew, its captain, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter vanished without a trace, as if they had been plucked from the deck by an unseen hand. Our story begins on December 4th, 1872. The British brigantine Dei Grazia was sailing through the choppy waters of the Atlantic, midway between the Azores and the coast of Portugal. The captain, David Morehouse, was a skilled and experienced seaman. As he scanned the horizon, he spotted another vessel, a brigantine like his own, about 6 miles distant. The ship was sailing erratically, its sails in a state of disarray, yawing the wind as if no one was at the helm. Captain Morehouse recognized the ship. It was the Mary Celeste, an American vessel that had left New York City 8 days before his own ship had left. He knew its captain, a man named Benjamin Spooner Briggs, to be an expert mariner, not one to sail his ship in such a sloppy and dangerous manner. A sense of deep unease began to settle over the crew of the Dei Grazia. Morehouse ordered his ship to close the distance. As they drew nearer, the silence from the other vessel was deafening. They hailed the Mary Celeste repeatedly, their calls echoing across the empty water. There was no response. Convinced that something was terribly wrong, Captain Morehouse sent his first mate, Oliver DeVoe, and 2 other seamen to board the mysterious, silent ship. What they found would become the stuff of legend. The Mary Celeste was a ghost ship. The ship itself was in good condition, wet from sea spray, but perfectly seaworthy. There were no signs of a struggle, no signs of violence. The ship's single lifeboat, however, was missing. As the boarding party explored the deserted vessel, the mystery only deepened. The cargo in the hold, 1,701 barrels of raw, denatured alcohol, was almost entirely intact and undisturbed. The crew's personal belongings, including their money and valuables, were still in their quarters untouched. In the captain's cabin, everything was in order. The ship's logbook was found, its final entry dated 10 days earlier, on the morning of November 25th. The entry was routine, noting the ship's position. It gave no hint of any trouble or impending disaster. On the captain's table, a slate was found, noting their position that morning. It seemed the ship had been abandoned in a hurry, but without any panic. The last entry in the log simply ended. The story of the people on board had just stopped. The ship was a perfectly preserved, floating mystery. Its crew, its captain, and his family, gone forever. Act 2. The souls on board. To understand the mystery of the Mary Celeste, one must first understand the people whose lives were so abruptly and inexplicably interrupted. This was not just a ship of anonymous sailors. It was a vessel carrying a family, a respectable captain, and a professional crew. Their disappearance is all the more baffling because, by all accounts, they were the last people who would simply abandon a perfectly sound ship in the middle of the ocean. At the heart of the story is Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. He was 37 years old, a devout Christian, a teetotaler, and a highly experienced and respected mariner from a long line of New England sea captains. He was known for his competence, his fairness, and his calm demeanor. He was a co-owner of the Mary Celeste and had invested his own life savings into the vessel. The idea that a man like Captain Briggs would panic and abandon his own ship without a very good, life-threatening reason was, to those who knew him, simply unthinkable. Making the tragedy even more poignant was the presence of his family. Captain Briggs was accompanied on this voyage by his 30-year-old wife, Sarah Elizabeth Briggs, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Matilda. Their 7-year-old son, Arthur, had been left behind in Massachusetts to attend school with his grandmother. Sarah was no stranger to life at sea, having accompanied her husband on previous voyages. The presence of a small organ, a melodeon, in the captain's cabin, along with some of Sophia's toys, painted a picture of a family trying to make a home for themselves amidst the vastness of the ocean. The thought of what might have happened to this young mother and her toddler daughter has added a layer of deep personal tragedy to the mystery. The crew of the Mary Celeste was also composed of competent, professional seamen. The first mate, Albert Richardson, had sailed with Captain Briggs before and was highly regarded. The second mate and the 4 general seamen were all German sailors of good reputation. They were a small but experienced crew, handpicked for the transatlantic voyage. There is no evidence whatsoever to suggest that the crew was mutinous or prone to violence. In fact, the opposite seems to be true. Captain Briggs was known for treating his crews well, and the men he hired were known for their professionalism. The ship itself was also sound. While some have called the Mary Celeste a cursed ship due to a series of minor mishaps in its early career, by 1872 it was a sturdy, reliable vessel. It had just been extensively refitted before its voyage from New York. It was carrying a cargo of 1,701 barrels of raw, denatured alcohol, a substance that is volatile, but not typically explosive in a way that, say, gunpowder would be. The ship was not overinsured, dispelling any theories that this was some kind of insurance fraud scheme. So we are left with a picture of a competent captain, a loving family, a professional crew, and a sturdy ship, all embarking on a routine transatlantic voyage. Yet, 10 days after the last log entry, the ship was found completely deserted, its lifeboat missing, its inhabitants vanished forever. There were no signs of a struggle, no bloodstains, no indication of foul play. The ship's sextant and chronometer were missing, suggesting an orderly, planned evacuation. It was as if the 10 souls on board had faced a sudden, terrifying, but unseen threat, a threat so great that it caused them to abandon their vessel in the middle of the ocean, a decision that would almost certainly lead to their deaths. What could that threat have been? This was a question that faced the salvage court in Gibraltar, the first official body to try and unravel the perfect, impossible mystery of the Mary Celeste. Act 3. The Labyrinth of Theories. When the case of the Mary Celeste was brought before the Vice Admiralty Court in Gibraltar, the first official investigation began. The court's primary job was to determine the amount of salvage money to be paid to the crew of the Dei Grazia. But to do that, they had to answer a much bigger question. What had happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste? The Attorney General in charge of the case, a man named Frederick Sollyflood, was a man prone to suspicion. He was convinced that the ship was not a victim of some strange natural phenomenon, but of human treachery. His primary theory was that there had been foul play. Sollyflood initially suspected that the crew had gotten into the ship's cargo of alcohol, gotten drunk, and then murdered Captain Briggs, his family, and the first mate in a drunken rage before escaping in a lifeboat. It was a simple, brutal theory, but it didn't fit the facts. The cargo of 1,701 barrels was raw, industrial alcohol, a substance that is virtually undrinkable. A thorough inspection showed that while 9 of the barrels were empty, the rest were completely secure. Furthermore, there were no signs of struggle on the ship, no bloodstains, no signs of violence whatsoever. The ship was strangely orderly for a scene of a supposed drunken mutiny. His next theory was that Captain Morehouse and the crew of the Dei Grazia were the culprits. Perhaps they had conspired with Captain Briggs to stage the disappearance for insurance money. Or, even more sinister, perhaps they had attacked the Mary Celeste at sea, murdered everyone on board, and then brought the ship to Gibraltar to claim the salvage money. This theory, too, quickly fell apart. The Mary Celeste had left New York 8 days before the day Grazia, making a planned rendezvous almost impossible. And Captain Morehouse and Captain Briggs were known to be good friends. There was absolutely no evidence to suggest foul play on the part of the rescuers. With the human treachery theories exhausted, investigators and the public alike began to turn to other, more exotic explanations. Could they have been attacked by pirates? While piracy was on the decline in the 1870s, it was not unheard of, but this theory also made no sense. Pirates would have certainly plundered the ship's cargo, the crew's valuables, and the ship's stores. But everything had been left untouched. This was not the work of pirates. What about a natural disaster? Could a sudden, massive rogue wave have swept the decks, washing everyone overboard? This is a possibility, but it seems unlikely. The ship itself was not severely damaged. The main hatch was secure, while some water was found in the hold. It was not an unusual amount for a ship of its size. And if a single wave had taken all 10 people at once, it would not explain why the lifeboat was missing or why the ship's navigational instruments had been taken. Another popular theory revolves around the ship's cargo of alcohol. Perhaps some of the barrels had begun to leak, creating a buildup of flammable vapor in the hold. Fearing an imminent catastrophic explosion, Captain Briggs might have ordered a temporary, precautionary evacuation. He may have ordered everyone into the lifeboat, trailing the ship by a long rope, waiting for the danger to pass. Then, a sudden storm or a broken tow line could have separated the small, vulnerable lifeboat from the larger vessel, leaving them stranded and lost in the middle of the ocean. This fear of explosion theory is compelling. It explains the orderly, non-violent abandonment of the ship. However, the 9 empty barrels, when inspected, showed no signs of leakage. And would a captain as experienced as Briggs really abandon his ship for a threat that had not yet materialized? Each logical explanation seems to be contradicted by a stubborn fact. The mystery is a perfect, maddening circle. The crew was professional, yet they disappeared. The ship was sound, yet it was abandoned. The cargo was valuable, yet it was untouched. The story of the Mary Celeste is not just a mystery because we don't know what happened. It's a mystery because nothing that could have happened seems to fit the strange, silent evidence left behind. Act 4, The Birth of a Legend. With no clear answers from the official investigation, the story of the Mary Celeste was released into the wild, a perfect, unsolved mystery for the public to speculate upon. The story might have remained a curious but obscure maritime footnote, if not for the intervention of a young, up-and-coming writer who would one day become world famous. In 1884, a short story was published anonymously in the Cornhill magazine. It was titled J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. The story was a fictionalized, first-person account from a supposed survivor, a ship named the Mary Celeste. The author of the story was none other than a young Arthur Conan Doyle, the future creator of Sherlock Holmes. In his thrilling, sensationalized version of the events, the ship was taken over by a vengeful former slave seeking a magical artifact. The crew and passengers were all systematically murdered. The story was a work of pure fiction, but it was so convincingly written that many readers believed it to be a true account. Conan Doyle's story went viral in the 19th century sense of the word. It was reprinted in newspapers around the globe. He got several key facts wrong, including the spelling of the ship's name. He wrote Mary Celeste, not Mary. But his version of the story, with its added drama and violence, became the one that was lodged in the public consciousness. Arthur Conan Doyle had inadvertently transformed a real-life mystery into a modern myth. His story opened the floodgates for a host of other, even more outlandish theories. The 20th century, with its fascination with the paranormal and the unexplained, provided a fertile ground for the Mary Celeste legend to grow. The story became entangled with the then-emerging myth of the Bermuda Triangle. Even though the ship was found thousands of miles away in the Atlantic, theories involving UFO abduction, attacks by giant sea monsters, and even time warps began to circulate. The mystery also attracted its share of hoaxers and charlatans. Over the years, several individuals have come forward claiming to be descendants of survivors, offering up forged diaries and fabricated stories. One of the most famous hoaxes was a man who claimed the crew had been killed by a giant octopus. Each new theory, no matter how absurd, added another layer to legend, making it increasingly difficult to separate the facts of the case from a century of fiction and fantasy. The Mary Celeste was no longer just a ship. It was a blank canvas upon which anyone could project their own fears and fantasies. Act 5, The Enduring Enigma. After the salvage corps in Gibraltar cleared the crew of the Dei Grazia of any wrongdoing, the Mary Celeste was returned to its owners. But the ship was now infamous, a vessel forever associated with a dark and unsolvable mystery. It became a cursed ship in the eyes of the maritime world. It was sold and resold, passing through 17 different owners over the next 13 years. Its name a constant reminder of the 10 souls who had vanished from its decks. Its final captain, in a desperate act of insurance fraud, deliberately ran the ship aground on a reef in Haiti in 1885. The ship was a total loss, its physical form finally destroyed, but its legend was now more powerful than ever. The mystery of the Mary Celeste has endured for 150 years because it is a perfect mystery. It is a story with compelling, dramatic setup, a cast of real, relatable characters, but no third act. There is no solution. It is a vacuum, and into that vacuum, we have poured our greatest fears and our wildest imaginations. So, what is the most likely explanation? Most modern historians and experts tend to favor a version of the fear of explosion theory. They believe that the volatile cargo of denatured alcohol may have created a situation, real or perceived, that was dangerous enough for the highly competent and responsible Captain Briggs to order a temporary evacuation. He would have loaded his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and his entire crew into the single lifeboat, trailing the ship by a long tow line. He would have taken his navigational instruments, a sensible precaution. Then, something catastrophic and sudden must have happened. Perhaps the tow line snapped. Perhaps a sudden squall separated the two vessels. The Mary Celeste, its sails still partially set, would have continued on its journey, a ghost ship sailing on without a crew. The 10 people in the small, fragile lifeboat would have been left to their fate, lost in the immensity of the Atlantic Ocean. This theory accounts for the orderly abandonment, the missing lifeboat, and the lack of any violence. It is a logical, plausible, and deeply tragic explanation, but it is, and will likely always remain, just a theory. In the end, the Mary Celeste is more than just a historical cold case. It is a powerful maritime ghost story, a cautionary tale about the vast, beautiful, and unforgiving nature of the sea. It is a story that reminds us that even in our modern world of science and technology, there are still some mysteries that are too deep to be fathomed, some questions that will never be answered. The 10 souls who were aboard the Mary Celeste sailed into a mystery, and they have never returned, leaving behind only their silent, empty ship as a testament to their unknown fate.